Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm excited for today's call because we're going to dig into ways that we can prevent COVID naturally. And I've covered this topic many times if you've followed along um, on my YouTube channel, and I can show you here some examples on my YouTube channel from as far back as when COVID started. I've been putting out videos, and I even did one initially about natural antiviral strategies for COVID that YouTube pulled down because it was tagged as false news and misinformation, which we all know it's not. So that one I can't show you, but I've got vitamin A for antiviral defense, vitamin C, natural strategies, and all of these videos, elderberry, all of these videos, many of them were addressing COVID specifically. So you can go back and view these on my channel, search for these titles. And I'm excited about today's episode because I want to cover new research that is reinforcing what I've been saying from day one, what many scientists have been saying from day one, and the research is finally saying it as well. So the first study I want to go over, I'll show you in 1 second, but the disclaimer is anything you learn from today's video or today's call, whether you're hearing it on the podcast or watching on the YouTube channel, is that before you make any changes, please consult with your primary care physician to make sure that that's right for you. Because if you're not a patient of mine, I can't make recommendations because I don't know your case. So just make sure you're speaking with your provider before you make any changes. And let's jump in. So this study from Frontiers in Public Health was published in August, and it's called Importance of Dietary Changes During the Coronavirus Pandemic, How to Upgrade Your Immune Response. So right there, 8 months ago, this study would have been blasphemy because the dogma from mainstream media from the start has been there's nothing you can do naturally to prevent COVID or help yourself. You have to wait for the vaccine, wear the mask, and lock down. But, critical thinkers worldwide from day one have been saying, well, that's not true. We have natural strategies available to us via nutrition and nutrients and physical activity and grounding and community and all of these things. Basically, lifestyle determines whether we get the infection or not and how severe it is if we get it. And this study is awesome at helping us understand it from a nutritional perspective. And I just want to point you to the abstract right here. They say in the abstract, adequate nutrition leading to an optimally functioning immune system may be associated with better outcomes with regards to preventing infection and complications in COVID-19, as well as developing a better immune response to other pathogenic viruses and microorganisms. So as we all know, nutrition isn't specific for COVID. If we have good nutrition and a good lifestyle, we're going to not only be better at preventing and defeating COVID, but also other viruses like Epstein-Barr virus or human herpes virus 6 or herpes simplex 1, and other microorganisms like strep and staph and yeast and all of parasites and those things. So this article is looking at macronutrients, micronutrients, metabolites from the gut, and nutrient timing to inform us on how our lifestyle specific to nutrition could help us prevent COVID or be one of the people that may contract COVID but stay asymptomatic or mild in terms of case outcome. So let's jump into an awesome image here, and I'll zoom in because this is great for us to see. And I shared this on social media last week because it's a great image and it explains a lot for everyone in a picture format versus words. And so on the left-hand side here, you can see poor dietary habits. On the right side, you can see healthy dietary habits. And what you'll see on the y-axis here, if we zoom in on the poor dietary habits, is right here is where lockout began. And so the authors dig into basically when lockout began, there were two ways you could go. You could allow the lockdown and the stress and the mainstream media to change your lifestyle, or you could have stood strong in your healthy lifestyle, regardless of lockdown and mainstream media and stress. So if I was one of the people that allowed lockdown to stress me out, then you can see here on the diagram, lockdown begins, there's a decline in exercise, right? We're locked down, gyms are closed. Well, then I guess I can't exercise. Well, there's lots of exercise available to us on the floor right when we fall out of bed. So there's really no excuse that we can't exercise if the gyms are closed. There's tons we can do. But say I use that excuse, well, that alone is going to promote weight gain. If I am locked down and I have a different schedule because maybe my workplace is closed and I'm not even working on Zoom, or if I am working on Zoom, it's still changing my schedule. And in previous episodes, we've talked about circadian rhythm and how it ties to sleep. Well, we've got a circadian rhythm to our nutrient timing as well, and we've covered that a little bit. And so if we're changing our body clocks, that changes our immune function. So disrupted eating schedules and increased snacking decreases T cells, which you could say are the snipers of our immune system, right? So if we have less snipers, especially COVID-specific snipers, then we're more prone to infection. If we're comfort eating, then we're probably eating high amounts of saturated fats, high amounts of sugar, and low nutrient density foods. And so those three things combine to form a triple whammy of decreased immune response, increased inflammation, and then the three combine to disrupt our gut microbiome, which can promote leaky gut. And then the leaky gut further promotes inflammation and reduction of optimal immune response. So this diagram shows us that as lockdown begins and our habits become poor, the effectiveness of our immune response decreases, thereby increasing the risk of COVID infection and severity of the course of the infection if you were to contract it. On the other hand, if lockdown occurred, so for me, lockdown happened and not much changed in terms of my lifestyle, other than maybe I had a little bit more time at work because I wasn't seeing as many people. But the exercise to me became more important because now I have to, burn energy, burn whatever stress is associated with the lockdown and all of that. If we stick to our regular eating schedule, we're promoting healthy immunity, decreased inflammation. We stick to our good fats, so high omega-3, low omega-6, high short chain fatty acids. That promotes healthy microbiome and low inflammation, a low sugar diet, and a high nutrient density diet. All of those things do the opposite of the previous picture. They promote healthy immune response, inflammatory balance, and a healthy gut, which improves our effectiveness against COVID. So not much probably new in terms of things you didn't know, but it's powerful because it's in the research in a COVID specific paper, and they're laying out the mechanisms as to how we can leverage natural things such as nutrition and lifestyle to fight the virus, even though we don't have a magic bullet vaccine. And even though we may not be wearing a mask or social distancing, we still have the built-in ability to fight viruses. Now, say we did the wrong side of things. Say we allowed the lockdown to tilt us towards a poor diet and bad habits. Well, then here's a different diagram showing us what could happen if we were infected with SARS-CoV-2, which leads to COVID-19. Okay, so if the virus infects our lungs and we've got a high fat diet, a high saturated fat diet with low omega-3s, low short chain fatty acids, and we're putting on weight, and that increases immune activation, that increases cytokine production from the immune activation, it increases promotion of leaky gut, and it increases endothelial dysfunction. And what studies are showing is that endothelial dysfunction is the main mechanism through which COVID hurts you and or kills you, depending on the severity of the case. And we're going to go over that in this next study right here, but real quick, I want to finish this diagram for you. So the more unhealthy we're living, the higher the risk of infection. And if we're infected, the more inflamed we are, and the increased risk of multiple organ failure and increased mortality. So you may have heard on the news some articles that say, well, these people with COVID died of lung complications. And then later it comes out, well, some people with COVID have GI complications, and some people have liver, and some have heart and kidney. Well, what is it? Why is one person dying from complications in one organ system, whereas another one is from another organ system? Well, as I talk about in my book, The Autoimmune Answer, and cover immune function and lifestyle and all of that, I talk about how we're all individuals. Each one of our puzzles is different. And so each individual puzzle may have different pieces involved that lead to death from a different organ system failure. But the underlying lowest common denominator in each case is endothelial disease. And so here's a study that was published recently from the European Society of Cardiology entitled COVID-19 is, in the end, an endothelial disease. And what is the endothelium? The vascular endothelium is the line of defense in your vessels that basically it's a layer of cells that prevent things in your blood vessels from breaking through deeper into your body. So if you lose your endothelium, you're at risk of clotting and vascular inflammation and cardiovascular disease, or disease wherever those vessels are. So you can see in the abstract here, the vascular endothelium functions to control blood flow, control clotting, control dilation and constriction of the vessels, controls inflammation, oxidative stress or rust, right? Vascular permeability, are your vessels leaking? Are you hemorrhaging? And then structure. So the concept of COVID-19 as an endothelial disease provides a framework for a rational treatment strategy. And if we shoot down here to this graphic, we can see on the left side is normal or a resting state for endothelium. On the right side here is if we have viral cytopathic effects. So say we have COVID and it's creating damage to the endothelium, then we have a potential risk of increased issues in the lungs like ARDS or ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, which was early in the COVID saga, which is what everyone was dying from or thought to be dying from. And that's why they were putting you on respirators right away. But endothelial dysfunction can lead to myocarditis or heart inflammation, can lead to stroke, to kidney injury, to clots. Okay, so we want to prevent the endothelial damage, and we do that by promoting a healthy lifestyle, an anti-inflammatory diet, a nutrient-rich diet, and the nutrients and anti-inflammatory components from that diet, as well as the rest of our lifestyle, promote a healthy endothelium, as well as a healthy immune system and immune response to the virus. So these studies are very interesting, and the study we started with here finishes up with a different graphic for us to show us. Oh, before we go there, I wanted to talk about one other thing. This first study looked at whether fasting could be beneficial in COVID. And what's interesting is COVID hit, technically by media standards, mid-February to mid-March, somewhere in there. And that was during the time of Ramadan for the Muslim population. And so Islam has 1.8 billion adherents, the study says. And so many of them were doing fasting due to Ramadan for religious reasons. And so we have this massive population of people we can study to say, to ask the question, does fasting increase risk of COVID infection or help us against COVID? And the couple studies that have come out so far have shown that the intermittent fasting performed by Islamic people during Ramadan led to decreased levels of inflammatory white blood cells, decreased levels of abdominal fat, and increased levels of healthy immune response compared to COVID patients. So the ones who fasted had better immune response and healthier inflammatory status than non-fasted people that were infected with COVID. So this suggests, we can't say it affirmatively, definitely yet, but this suggests that intermittent fasting supports a healthy immune response, specifically a healthy antiviral response for us if we are to be infected with COVID. And fasting, I think it's pretty firm. You know, we need more research specific to COVID, but if we look at other areas of life where they've studied, there's a lot of study for intermittent fasting, and there's lots of research showing that fasting decreases immunosenescence or aging. Fasting is anti-aging. Fasting extends life expectancy. Fasting reduces rust and fire or oxidative stress and inflammation. Fasting improves lung function, and it helps alleviate or reverse autoimmune disorders. So it's likely that as the studies come out, they're going to also show us that fasting improves your anti-COVID capacity. So they finish with this great graphic here that just sums up everything we've already said, except the thing we haven't gone deep into that the study does is specific nutrients. So remember, we started the call with me sharing a screenshot of my YouTube channel where I said I've made multiple videos and even had one pulled down by YouTube as fake news, right? Saying that vitamins, minerals, and nutrition can be used for antiviral defense and anti-COVID defense. So you can go back and view these videos. But this study ends by showing us this graphic, and they list the nutrients that are very important and have high amounts of research support to them. So if we zoom in here, you can see the balanced diet provides probiotics, short-chain fatty acids, polyphenols, vitamin A, E, C, D, zinc, iron, magnesium, selenium, copper, iodine, omega-3 fats. So having sufficient amounts of all these promote an immune response that clears virus. So a healthy diet, healthy lifestyle promotes this. An unhealthy diet promotes insufficiency of those vitamins and nutrients and promotes increased inflammation, decreased immune response, and increased risk of systemic inflammation, acute respiratory distress syndrome, cytokine storm, all those scary terms you've heard on the news. So while if you're somebody who's interested in a pharmaceutical discovery for COVID or a vaccine discovery for COVID, while you're waiting for those things, we can't ignore the research and the science and just the intuition that we all have that what you put in your mouth and how you live dictates the strength of your immune system and whether or not you're going to be infected and how severe it will be. So move forward in life with confidence that if you are living the lifestyle that we promote in functional medicine, that you are moving towards your best self every day and decreasing your risk of the infection and severe course of infection with each good choice you're making. So every choice matters. Apple or donut, right? Stairs or elevator. First spot in the parking lot or last spot in the back of the parking lot, right? Argue or make up. All of these things, stay up and binge watch one more show for an hour or get that extra hour of sleep. All of these things tie into our immunity and our health and our ability to survive the worldwide pandemic.